Well, for more on what we can expect to come out of this summit, we can cross now live to Brussels and bring in our correspondent, Dave Keating, who is standing by. Dave, we heard there from Italy's Prime Minister talking about his own views ahead of this two-day summit. Talk us through, though, the divide which has already formed between member states across the bloc when it comes to immigration and asylum policy.
Yes, Europe's north-south divide is really going to be on display here in Brussels on this issue of migration. Essentially, the southern countries, including Italy, say they need more solidarity from the north in dealing with the migration crisis. That's because they're on the front lines. This is the place where these migrants and asylum seekers arrive. They're specifically asking for money from the EU to help deal with this situation, and they want an end to the so-called Dublin regulation system. This is the system which returns asylum seekers to their original EU country of entry, which very often is Italy or Greece or Spain. But on the other side, the Northern European countries are very wary of handing over a blank check to Italy, and they also still want to be able to return asylum seekers to those countries where they entered. Now, Angela Merkel is going to be key to all this. Usually at these summits, it's the other leaders asking German Chancellor Angela Merkel for things, but at this case, she's coming hat in hand to them because she's facing a domestic political dispute with her sister party, the CSU. That's the Bavarian wing of her party that wants to crack down on migration. And it's a crisis that could actually result in her government collapsing. So she needs some kind of agreement from the other EU leaders that they will they will speed up transfers of asylum seekers from Germany to other countries. She may be trying to get bilateral or trilateral deals with other EU countries on this. But the difficulty, of course, is this is essentially the opposite of what Italy is asking for. So it's going to be a very interesting day, probably involving some horse trading.
Dave, we of course shouldn't forget that there are other issues on the agenda here in Brussels, with of course the question of Brexit popping up once again.
Yes, Theresa May is going to give an update to EU leaders tonight over dinner. That's going to be really crucial because the leaders, the 27 remaining countries, are supposed to discuss Brexit tomorrow morning. But honestly, there's not much to discuss because the UK remains so internally divided over their own position. Now, they're supposed to all agree an exit deal by October. But with the UK not really having a position, particularly on this contentious issue of the Irish border, that timeline is looking very much in doubt. So Theresa May needs to convince the other 27 that this timeline is still possible. If she can't convince them, they may delay that timeline to December. If that happens, people are going to be really skeptical that Brexit is actually going to happen, or that if it does happen, that there could be anything but a very economically damaging hard Brexit. The leaders will also be talking about the impending trade war between the EU and the US. They're expected to give their unanimous backing to retaliatory EU tariffs against Donald Trump's tariffs on European aluminum and steel. And they're also expected to give some kind of signal about possible preemptive tariffs if Donald Trump decides to go ahead with tariffs on EU car imports from the EU, which he has said he's considering and may announce next month. The EU leaders may come out with a strong statement saying exactly what they would do if he were to put such tariffs in place. And finally, they'll be talking about enlargement. Now that the name dispute between Greece and Macedonia is settled, Macedonia's EU accession talks can go ahead. Germany would like to see them go ahead, but the Netherlands is skeptical. They have other reservations. So that issue is going to be discussed today. So a really full agenda. These are only some of the issues on what is on the plate of what is being called the mother of all summits.
Okay, Dave Keating, our correspondent there in Brussels. Thank you very much.